today the topic I've been asked to talk about is the importance of practice, which is possibly the most important topic to talk about. But before deciding what is the importance of practice, we need to decide why we are practicing. What is our aim? What do we want to achieve by practicing? According to Bhagavan, the only worthy aim is the annihilation of our ego, because the ego is the root of all trouble. When the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When there's no ego, there's nothing. There's just what we really are, which is infinite peace and happiness and cit-jaḍa-granthi. So our aim is to get rid of the ego. So how do we get rid of the ego? Bhagavan says there are two means, self-surrender and self-investigation. Generally when people hear about self-surrender, they think of what are all the things we can surrender to God. All my desires, my attachments, ultimately our will we have to surrender to God. That is the usual conception of self-surrender. Thy will be done. I surrender my will to your will. I have no will of my own. Whatever happens is happening by the grace of God and is for our good. So whatever happens, whether normally we judge it as good or bad, if we are surrendered, everything is good, because it's all the will of Bhagavan, all the will of God. But is it possible for the ego to surrender its will? The very nature of the ego is to have desire. The very nature of the ego, Bhagavan says in Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, Urupatri-undam, urupatri-nikkum, urupatri-undu-mika-ongam. That is, grasping form, it rises. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes greatly. Uru-vittu urupatram, leaving one form, it grasps another form. So the nature of the ego is grasping. It's always attaching itself to something. So it is driven by desire, the desire to experience things other than itself. That is the fuel that gives rise to the ego and that sustains the ego. So long as we remain as an ego, we cannot completely surrender our will to God. And even if we could surrender our will to God, we still haven't surrendered ourselves, because it's self-surrender. We have to surrender ourselves. The ego has to surrender itself to God. So how is that possible? Though Bhagavan says at first that there's two options, either self-surrender or self-investigation, later on he says the only way to surrender the ego itself is by investigating what it is. Because the ego, when he says ego rises by grasping form, what he means by grasping form is being aware of phenomena. Because he calls the ego a formless phantom. So it's got no hands or arms to grasp anything. It grasps in its awareness. It grasps by attending to things other than itself. It is grasping them. And everything other than itself is a form. So since it rises by grasping form, stands by grasping form, feeds itself and nourishes itself by grasping form, leaves one form and grasps another form, that's the nature of the ego. Bhagavan says in the same verse 25 of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, Tedinal otum pidicum. If sought, it takes flight. What he means by tedinal, if sought, is if we investigate it, if the ego, instead of trying to grasp other things, if it tries to grasp itself, it subsides and disappears, because it is a formless phantom, as he calls it. Uruvatra peyahande, the formless phantom ego. So phantoms seem to exist only when we don't look at them carefully. If we're walking through a dark forest at night, there may seem to be so many phantoms around us. But if we look at any of the seeming phantoms, we don't actually find anything there. So likewise with the ego seems to exist so long as we're looking at anything else. When we try to look at the ego to see what it is, it vanishes. So it is only by self-investigation, by the ego investigating itself, but it will cease to exist. So surrender is complete only when the ego investigates itself and thereby loses its separate existence and merges back in the source from which it came, which is what we really are. Bhagavan makes this very clear in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, in which he says, Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalambarutku, satram idum kodamo, atma-nishta paranai irupade, tanne isanaku alippadam. Atma-nishta paranai irupade means being as one who is firmly fixed in oneself. Atma-nishta means being fixed in or established as or firm in oneself. And he explains what is being firmly established in oneself in the first clause, which is Anma chintane tavira vera chintane kalambarutku satram idam kodamo. That means giving no room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means thought of oneself, but in effect it means self-attentiveness. So attending only to oneself and thereby giving no room to the rising of any other thought, that is being firmly fixed in oneself, and he says that alone is giving oneself to God. So ultimately, our surrender, whatever else we may surrender, we can surrender our will, we can surrender our possessions, we can surrender everything other than ourself, but in order to surrender ourself, the one who is trying to surrender, we have to investigate who we are. So ultimately, self-surrender and self-investigation are one and the same path. It's the initial stages when we're trying to purify our mind, give up our attachments to other things, but self-surrender seems to be a separate path. That's why Bhagavan gave it as, he sometimes said, either investigate who you are or surrender yourself entirely. Both are necessary. We can't investigate ourselves effectively without surrendering ourselves, because the ego is what we seem to be. It's not what we actually are. So long as we seem to be this ego, we cannot know what we actually are. So we have to give up this ego in order to experience what we actually are. So actually, self-investigation and self-surrender, they're just two sides of a single sheet of paper. You could say two sides of a single coin, but you can cut a coin in half. A piece of paper, we can't cut it and separate the two sides. So they're so completely inseparable, self-investigation and self-surrender. So this is the practice we have to do. And the importance of practice is emphasized by Bhagavan in the previous paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, in which he says, God and Guru are in truth not separate, they're one. That is, Bhagavan, whom we take to be our Guru, he himself is God. There's no God other than Bhagavan for us. And he says, just like the prey that is caught in the jaw of the tiger cannot escape, so also those who are caught in the glance or the look of the Guru's grace will certainly be saved and will never be forsaken. But then he adds a final sentence. In the final sentence he says, Eninum Guru Kartya Varipadi Tavarada Nadikabendum. That means, however, it is necessary to unfailingly follow the path shown by the Guru. And then in the very next sentence, he shows what is the path by connecting self-investigation and self-surrender together and showing that they're one and the same. That is the path shown to us by Bhagavan, and that, according to Bhagavan, is the only way to annihilate the ego. So Bhagavan was able to when the fear of death came to him, he was able in a fraction of a second to turn his mind within and to experience himself as he really is, and to attain what we call self-realization, which is actually just the loss of the complete merging of the ego in its source. There's no person then remaining to say, I have realized myself. It's the loss of the ego that takes that person to be I. That is what is rather inappropriately called self-realization. It's actually just a complete loss of the ego. That's all. Bhagavan said there's nothing to be achieved. We are already that. The only thing is, Bhagavan said sometimes about this word self-realization, Bhagavan said there's nothing to be realized. What is real is always real. What we need to do, the problem is we now have realized the unreal. We take this, what is unreal to be real. So all we have to do is to unrealize the unreal, and the reality will always remain as it is. So, as Bhagavan also, he said the same thing in another way, there's nothing to be achieved, all we have to do is to give up everything. And since the root of everything is ego, if we give up the ego, we give up everything. That he also says in the next verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he says, Ahaṁ ātma-vicāra. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahaṁ. If the ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahaṁ. The ego itself is everything. Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. Therefore, know that investigating what it is giving up everything. So our aim is not to achieve anything, our aim is to give up everything. And we can give up everything only by giving up the root of everything, which is the ego. And for that, practice is necessary. Oh, I was saying, Bhagavan was able to achieve it in a fraction of a second. But some of us may have been practicing for 30, 40, 50 years, but we still feel we still haven't achieved what Bhagavan achieved in a split second. But Bhagavan said, those who in this lifetime have achieved it seemingly without effort are those who have put in all the hard work previously. So we all have to Bhagavan also said, no one has ever succeeded in this path without perseverance. Why is that? Because it's the very nature of the ego, the very nature of the mind to go outwards, to always try to be grasping things. Going outwards doesn't only mean going out to the world. Even if we're sitting with our eyes closed and thinking thoughts are external to ourselves. They're not anything other than ourselves is external, is what Bhagavan means by outwards. So what Bhagavan calls inwards is only facing ourselves. So it's the very nature of the ego to go outward, to grasp things other than itself. Since that's the nature of the ego, we have to weaken the attachments of the ego in order to destroy the ego. If you have a very dense bush and you want to cut up the root of it, in order to get close to the root, you first need to cut some of the extraneous, some of the dense foliage and branches and everything. Then only you can get at the root. Likewise, we first have to weaken all the desires and attachments of the ego in order to annihilate the ego. Because so long as the ego's attachments and desires are strong, it's not going to let go. And until it lets go, it's not going to be destroyed. Bhagavan is never going to come and kill our ego until we surrender it to him. He's not going to ever force it on us, but he will work within us, preparing us to be ready, to be willing to surrender to him. That is what the practice is all about. By doing the practice, by turning our attention within, we are, because the nature of our ego is to turn its attention outwards, to always be trying to know other things, to the extent that we manage to turn within, to that extent we are giving up our hold on external things, and the ego is thereby subsiding. And to the extent that the ego subsides, we are leaving Bhagavan free to do his work. If the prey is in the jaws of the tiger, but always struggling, the tiger will wait until the prey keeps quiet, then only it will swallow the prey. So Bhagavan isn't going to swallow us until we stop struggling. And in order to stop struggling, we have to turn our attention back to ourselves. So this practice, we can't, most of us, our desires and attachments are too strong. So we have to, patient perseverance is absolutely essential. We have to just go on and on, try, however, Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nāṇ Ār, however many thoughts arise, what does it matter? Whenever, as and when each thought arises, we should investigate to whom it has arisen, and it will be clear it's to me. By thus investigating who am I, the thought which had risen, the mind will return to its source, and the thought which had risen will subside. And then he says, Ipati paraka paraka, by practicing and practicing like this, the strength of the mind to abide in its source increases. So this is the only way. It's only by persistent practice that we can succeed in this path. So do you want me to go on talking, or does anyone have any questions? What Bhagavan has taught us is very, very simple, and it all hangs together so coherently. All that is necessary, I mean, it's very easy to understand Bhagavan's teachings if we clear out all our old preconceptions, and if we're ready to jettison all our former beliefs and ideas and take all that Bhagavan has taught us on board. His teachings are extremely simple. Having understood it, all we have to do is to put it into practice. And we will constantly fail, but it's like a small child learning to walk. When a small child learns to walk, it falls over so many times. But no child has ever given up. Every child perseveres until it succeeds. Or like learning to ride a bicycle. How can we learn to ride a bicycle? It's only by practice. We can't learn to ride a bicycle by reading books about riding a bicycle. It's only by practice that we can actually learn. We can understand the theory of of balance and everything, but we can't actually learn to cycle until we practice it. Likewise, we can understand all the theory, but that's of no use to us unless we put it into practice. Because theory doesn't annihilate the ego. Because who is the one who understands Bhagavan's teachings? I do. It's the ego. So understanding Bhagavan's teachings is no big deal. Big deal is putting it into practice. Yes.
About the practice of self-control.
Yes.
You focus on I.
Yes.
Investigate the I.
Yes.
And eventually you arrive at a state that there is absolute blankness or silence or...
There's never any blankness according to Bhagavan.
You are without thought.
Yes. Yes.
You are without thought.
You are not without thought because you are a thought. The you who starts to meditate.
No, and what I'm
yes.
telling you is, when the I subsides,
yes.
he says, I arises.
I am I is what it means. Yes.
I am I arises.
Yes.
So what exactly is the process of subsidence of I and arrival of I are?
We rise as this ego by grasping a form as ourself. We never experience ourself without experiencing ourself as a body. Whether in waking or in dream, we always are aware of ourself as I am this body. It's not always the same body, because whatever body we experience as ourself is just a mental projection. Like the body, like we all recognize now, but the body that we took as ourself in the dream we had last night was our own mental projection. Bhagavan says this body we now take as ourself is likewise just a mental projection. So the ego rises by projecting and grasping a body as itself. That is the first thought, I am this body. That is the ego. That's the root of all other thoughts. Once this first thought, I am this body, this person called Guru Das or Michael or whoever, once that thought has risen, all the other thoughts arise. So long as the ego can never be without thoughts. It itself is a thought, and it cannot stand without grasping thoughts. So we can be in a thought-free state only when the ego itself subsides. So the only thought-free state we experience normally is deep sleep. Or by certain yogic practices, we can achieve manōlaya, which is just another, it may be called by fancy names like nirvikalpa samadhi and everything, but according to Bhagavan, that's all just manōlaya. It is useless. Just like we get no closer to annihilating our ego by sleeping for 8 hours, we get no closer to annihilating our ego by being in nirvikalpa samadhi for 8 hours. And to illustrate that, Bhagavan told the story of a yogi who was practicing some form of yoga or meditation on the banks of the Ganga, and he often used to go into nirvikalpa samadhi for prolonged periods. One day when he woke up after a prolonged period in nirvikalpa samadhi, he was feeling thirsty, so he asked his disciple to bring him water from the Ganga, which was nearby. His disciple went to get the water, and the yogi went back into nirvikalpa samadhi, and that time he didn't wake up for 300 years. And after 300 years when he woke up, the first thing he asked for, he angrily asked, "Where's my water?" The Ganga in the meanwhile had changed its course, gone somewhere else. The disciple was long since dead. But the last thought he had before going into nirvikalpa samadhi was the first thought he had when coming out. Bhagavan said that means not even the most superficial vasana is destroyed by nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa samadhi is no different to sleep.
Also manōlaya.
In manōlaya, yeah, it's just another name for manōlaya. It's another type of manōlaya. We can go into manōlaya, we can take drugs to go into manōlaya, we can be anesthetized to go into manōlaya. Manōlaya is no big deal because the difference between manōlaya and manōnāśa is, in both states, the ego is absent. But from manōlaya, it rises again. From manōnāśa, it never rises. Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Upadēśa Undiyār. So what we are seeking is, we're not just seeking a thought-free state, because we experience a thought-free state every night in sleep. What we are seeking to know is what we are. So we need to, it's not, the reason Bhagavan says whatever thought may arise, we should investigate to whom it arises, and thereby the thought will subside. It is not that our aim is not to achieve freedom from thought. Our aim is to know what is this ego, because only when we investigate ourselves and see what we actually are, the ego will be annihilated. If we see a snake lying on the path in the dark, we can take a stick and start beating it. But if that snake is just a rope, however hard we beat it with the stick, we're not going to kill it. If we want to kill that snake, there's only one way. Look at it very carefully and see that it was never a snake, it's only a rope. So the only way we can destroy this ego, because the ego doesn't actually exist, it seems to exist, just like the snake seems to exist, but it doesn't actually exist. The only way to destroy this ego is to look at it very carefully and see what it actually is. So when we look at ourselves very carefully, automatically our attention is withdrawn from other thoughts. So thoughts do subside. when we are practicing this, but the subsidence of thought is not our aim, because the subsidence of thought, we achieve that every night when we go to sleep. So freedom from thought is not our aim. Freedom from the ego, the first thought, is our aim. And not temporary freedom as we have experienced every night in sleep, permanent freedom. In sleep, when we go to sleep because we're tired. Or if we have anesthesia, we go to sleep because of the anesthetic. Or if we practice pranayama or something and we go into manōlaya, we go because of that. Because we go into that state without knowing, but without seeing what the ego actually is, we come out of it again. So what we need is not Bhagavan says sleep is a state of perfect self-awareness. But in sleep, the self-awareness that we experience in sleep, we experience it as a result of the subsidence of our ego. But in order to destroy the ego, the ego has to subside as a result of clear self-awareness. That is, as a result of by our being perfect, by our being attentively self-aware, the ego will be destroyed. But if the ego subsides, what remains is only self-awareness, because self-awareness, Bhagavan says, it's like the screen in a cinema. The screen is there whether pictures are projected on it or not. So the self-awareness, we are always self-aware. That self-awareness is the background to everything that we experience. There's never a moment, whatever we may experience, we cannot experience anything without being aware of ourselves as the one who is aware of the other thing. And even when we're aware of nothing else, as in sleep, we're still aware of ourselves. So self-awareness is the basic background. That is why it's said in Kaivalya Navanītam, one term for self-awareness is ātma-vicāra. It is said in Kaivalya Navanītam, ātma-vicāra is not inimical to ajñāna. That is, even when we are in a state of ajñāna, we still know ourselves. So merely being aware of ourselves is not sufficient. So the term they use in Kaivalya Navanītam, it says jnana is insufficient. We need vṛtti-jñāna. What is meant by vṛtti-jñāna, Bhagavan explained, that means being attentively self-aware. We're always self-aware. Throughout the waking, dream and sleep state, we're self-aware. But in the waking state and dream state, we are very interested in all the other things we're experiencing. Because we're so interested in experiencing other things, though we're self-aware, we're negligently self-aware. We're attentive to other things, the things that interest us, the things that catch our attention. So though we are self-aware, we neglect our self-awareness. So we're negligently self-aware. So in order to destroy the ego, we need to be attentively self-aware. So that attentive self-awareness is what is called in Kaivalyam as vṛtti-jñāna. So we shouldn't be concerned whether thoughts are there or not. Bhagavan said, what does it matter however many thoughts arise? Whatever thought may arise, can any thought arise without you being there to be aware of it? To whom do thoughts arise? They arise to you. So every thought that arises comes to remind you of yourself. If we use every thought as a reminder, then thoughts are not our enemies. Thoughts are there to help us, just to remind us to attend to ourselves. So it's a matter of changing our attitude. Thoughts are our enemies if we allow them to distract us. If we use them to remind ourselves, this thought appears because I am aware of it. If we use it to remind it, if we use it to remind ourselves of ourselves, the basic self-awareness, then thoughts we can turn even our enemies into our friends. And when by persevering in attending to ourselves more and more and more, eventually the clarity of self-awareness will become, it will become so bright that the ego will be dissolved. And where it dissolves, what remains is what Bhagavan calls Nāṉ, I am I. The reason he used that term Nāṉ is because he said the nature of the ego is I am this or I am that. Nāṇ-ādu. The ego always identifies itself with something other than itself. So I am this or I am that is the ego. I am I is what we actually are. That is, the ego cannot, we cannot be anything other than ourselves. So to say I am this or I am that, this and that always refers to something else. So Bhagavan said, even the Mahavakya, ahaṁ brahmāsmi, that is not the greatest of the Mahavakyas. He said, the Mahavakya in the Bible, I am that I am, that is the greatest of the Mahavakyas. Because there's nothing but I. I is identified with I. But I cannot be anything other than myself, can I? To say I'm this body is false. To say I'm this person, to say I'm Michael is false. Because Michael comes and goes. So the only thing I can be is myself. So I am I. That is the true identity of ourself, is I am I. I am this or I am that. Even I am Brahman is false. Because Brahman, for us, so long as we think about Brahman, Brahman is just an idea. To experience what Brahman really is that which is always shining in us as I am I. As he says in that Hridaya Guhara Madhye Kaivalam Brahma Matram Ahamiti. Yes. So it's all, Brahman is always shining as I. So the true experience of Brahman is I, not I am Brahman.
Michael, can I take you up on one point? I don't mean to be nitpicking, but when you say that thoughts can be our friends rather than our enemies, in the sense that they remind us of what we should be doing.
Yes.
But surely thought of any sort, by its nature, is blocking off us from ourselves, from the self, isn't it?
The thought isn't blocking off. It's the fact that we follow the thought, but we attach ourselves to the thought. That's what blocks us off. But if we take the thought as a reminder, and to whom does the thought occur? To me. If we use the thought to remind ourselves of our own existence, we are then not holding the thought, we're letting go of the thought and turning back to ourselves. So in that sense, the thoughts can be our friends.
I see what you mean.
That only if we don't associate ourselves with them, they're our friends. If we associate ourselves with them, they're our enemies.
Okay, so, I mean, if I'm sort of lying in bed and I manage to remind myself that the first thing I've got to think of is who am I, and keep the sort of I current running. But I also know that shortly after I get out of bed, I've got to do certain things in the kitchen, or I've got certain tasks to...
Who has all these tasks?
The little I. And it's precisely that which
it's not the little I who has any... The little I doesn't have any tasks. It's Alistair who has all these tasks, isn't it?
Alistair the ego?
No, Alistair's not the ego. Alistair is the one whom the ego says is I. Who is it who says, I am Alistair? That is the ego.
Yes. Okay, but nevertheless.
Because you feel I am Alistair, because of that identification with Alistair, and because Alistair has to do things, Alistair is a body, a person, and this person needs to eat, it needs to pay the bills, it needs to do this, it needs to do that, all these things. So long as you're Alistair, you will be feeling, I need to do all these things. That is what is called the kartṛtva-buddhi. Kartṛtva-buddhi means the sense of doership. Kartṛtva-buddhi means the sense I have to do. That kartṛtva-buddhi is the real problem, because it's because we take ourselves, because I feel I am Michael, I feel I have so many responsibilities. And I feel, but actually according to Bhagavan, we don't have any responsibilities. Bhagavan says your only duty is not to be this or that, your only duty is to be. We don't actually, we think it's necessary. We think, how can I carry on with my life? How can I look after my family? How can I do this? How can I do that if I don't think? According to Bhagavan, it's not necessary to think at all, because as he said in the note to his mother, that which is to happen will happen however much we try to obstruct it. That which is not to happen will not happen however much we try to achieve it. Therefore we should keep quiet. Does that mean we shouldn't do anything? No, we shouldn't do anything, but it doesn't mean the body, speech and mind shouldn't do things. The body, speech and mind will be made to act, as he says in the first sentence, avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angan girundu ātma-vicāra. That literally means avarava prarabdha prakaram means according to their prarabdha, their destiny. That means according to the destiny of each person. Adakanavan means he who is for that, which means God or Guru. Angan girundu, being there. That means in the heart of each one. ātma-vicāra. ātma-vicāra means we'll make them dance. Okay. So it's Bhagavan who, according to our destiny, Bhagavan will make our body, speech and mind do the actions that they need to do. We don't have to attend to that. It will all go on if we have sufficient faith in Bhagavan. Sadhuam used to say, supposing you had a servant who came to you and said, I will do whatever you want me to do. How much we'll feel relieved from all the responsibilities we have, because this servant is ready to do everything. But such a servant has come into our life. That servant is Bhagavan. He has come and he's offered even to think for us. If we have trust in what Bhagavan has taught us, we can give even the burden of thinking to him. That is why he says in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, after saying being firmly fixed in oneself, giving no room to the rising of any thought other than the thought of oneself, is surrendering oneself to God. Then in the following sentences, he explains why it is not necessary to think of anything else. He says, however much burden we place on God, he will bear all of it. After all, God is bearing the burden of all this universe, isn't he? So when that one Parameshwara Shakti, that one ruling power is driving all the activities in this universe, why should we be thinking, I should act in this way, I should act in that way? When you're traveling in a train, you know that the train is carrying all the burden. Why don't you just put your suitcase down beside you or on the luggage rack or wherever? Why do you insist on carrying it on your head? Our thinking any thought is carrying luggage on our head. It's not necessary to do so, because what is to happen is going to happen anyway. We don't have to think about it. It's because of our lack of faith in Bhagavan that we think anything. So none of us here really have faith in Bhagavan. Because if we have faith in Bhagavan, we'd let him do all the thinking for us. We can't have faith in Bhagavan. We can't have full faith in Bhagavan. We can't have that full trust in Bhagavan so long as the ego exists. Because the nature of the ego is grasping things. Nature of the ego is feeling I am this person. I need to survive as this person. I need food, I need shelter, I need this, I need that. I have to act in this way. I have the Upadēśa Undiyār, as Bhagavan says in that paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. Why should we be thinking that, he asks us? But we all say, oh no, Bhagavan, it's necessary. How will I get my food if I don't go and work for it? How will I pay the rent? How will I do this? How will I do that? And I've got my family I need to look after. Bhagavan says, why you carry the luggage on your head?
Yes. Okay.
So we're all sitting here carrying our luggage on our head.
I'm tempted to take it a bit further because, I mean, if you look at Bhagavan himself, I mean, in the way that he got up in the morning, he would go into the kitchen and start chopping vegetables and doing things.
Who did?
Bhagavan.
Who is Bhagavan? Well, once when Bhagavan was in the kitchen cutting vegetables, a visitor came and he was asking, where is Ramana, where is Ramana? Bhagavan pointed to a big brass vessel in which they cooked the food and said there. It was on that brass vessel, it was carved Ramana. And then when people say, oh, Bhagavan, why you say like that to him? Bhagavan said, well, at least on that the name Ramana is carved. There's no name carved on this. So why should you think this is Ramana?
Okay.
Because we take ourselves to be a body, we take Bhagavan to be a body. But according to Bhagavan, what's Bhagavan's basic teaching? I am not this body. So this is not Bhagavan. This is, and when, to explain this, Bhagavan said, the form of the Guru, the outward form of the Guru, is like the lion that appears in an elephant's dream. The lion that appears in the elephant's dream is just a mental projection, it's not real. But because of the elephant's fear of the lion, as soon as it sees the lion, it wakes up. So also, though the name and form of the Guru is unreal, it brings about the real awakening by turning our attention inwards. So this isn't Bhagavan. The one who got up and cut the vegetables and made the idlis and everything, that is not Bhagavan. One who is sitting there on the couch answering questions, that is not Bhagavan. The real Bhagavan is what is, once Janaki Mata came to the ashram, and Bhagavan was just returning from Gosala, the cow shed. And seeing Bhagavan coming there, she thought this is a very good opportunity. She came to him, prostrated and caught hold of his feet. And Bhagavan stood there and asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm holding the feet of my Guru. He said, these are not the feet of your Guru. These feet are perishable. The feet of your Guru are shining in you as I. Grasp those feet. Only those feet will save you.
Okay. That's wandered away a bit, but I see what you're getting at.
No, but I mean, the whole point is Bhagavan is turning our attention constantly back towards ourselves.
So we've all, yes, I mean, we're all striving to sort of be like Bhagavan, a complete sort of non-persons, not.
We don't have to strive to be a non-person. All we have to strive is to see what we actually are.
No, anyway,
and we will find we were never a person in the first place.
I don't want to continue this anyway. I'm utterly defeated.
Well, the problem is we all want to continue. You're far more advanced than us. You've given up. That's what we all need to do.
Rubbish, nonsense.
Message is going home.
Ultimately, that's what we all have to do. We all have to give up. Yeah. But because we're not yet ready to give up, but we have to. But practice is necessary.
I do see what you're getting at.
Yes.
We are talking about the theme practice.
Yes.
So when we want to practice on a daily basis,
yes.
We were talking about the ego and the thought.
Yes.
So do I have to assume that the ego is consisting of thoughts about the need, about insecurity, about fear, about envy, jealousness? All these things compose this ego which brings those thoughts about me.
No, the ego is the root of all these other thoughts. The ego doesn't consist of thoughts. The ego is what gives rise to all other thoughts. Who feels insecurity? Who is anxious about this or that? Who is attached? Who has desire? But desire, no thought other than the ego is aware of anything. Desires aren't aware of anything. Insecurity isn't aware of anything. But there's one sentient thing which feels insecurity, which is aware of insecurity, aware of wanting this and fearing that. That thing which is aware of all these things, that is the ego. That is the one we have to look at and see what it really is. So we have to leave aside all our insecurity, all our fears, all our desires and everything, to see who is the one who feels all these things. To whom do all these things appear? We don't feel insecurity or anything during sleep. Why do we feel insecure now? Because we have risen as this ego. So all problems come with the rising of the ego. The ego doesn't consist of thoughts, it is the root of all thoughts. All other thoughts are an expansion of the ego. So in that sense we can say everything is the, Bhagavan says, ahandeya yavamam. Everything, the ego is everything. Because everything, all other thoughts are an expansion of the ego. As soon as the ego rises, it expands as numerous thoughts. But the ego itself is the one who is aware of all those thoughts, the one who experiences all those thoughts, the one who is troubled by all those thoughts, the one who is running after and attaching itself to those thoughts.
No, I get this point. I think what I want to further clarify is you are saying self-investigation and self-surrender, two sides of the same paper.
Yeah.
So does it mean that whenever I have a thought, I surrender to God, Bhagavan, or when I have a need or anything that I give up and surrender to God, then I go to the other side and investigate, and then it subsides my thoughts and ego goes
the only way we can, to some extent, we can surrender our will to God. We can cultivate the attitude, but whatever is happening is by Bhagavan's will for our good. And we can, in that way, we can slowly lessen the intensity of our likes and dislikes. So when a painful thing comes to us, instead of getting much agitated by it, we think, okay, this has happened by Bhagavan's will, this is for my good. In that way we can pacify our mind to some extent. That is what Bhagavan called partial surrender. But in order to partially surrender, there has to be one who does the partial surrender. That is the ego. And for the surrender to be complete, that ego itself has to be given up. And the only way to give up the ego is to investigate it, to turn our attention back to see, who am I who have risen to surrender myself to Bhagavan? Even to think I have to surrender to Bhagavan is a huge presumption, because where is any I other than Bhagavan?
In day-to-day practice, should we start thinking about surrendering and investigation together? Or how
the practice is to think only about yourself, nothing else. Ātma-chintane tavera vera-chintane kalambatu satramidam kadamal, without giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. So Atma-chintana is the sole practice Bhagavan talks about. He called it in a few paragraphs earlier, he talked about Svarūpa-dhyāna. That's the same as Atma-chintana. He talked about Svarūpa-smaraṇa. That's the same as Atma-chintana. He talks about ātma-vicāra. That's the same as Atma-chintana. He talks of Nāṉ Ār vicārane. That's the investigation of who am I. That's the same as Atma-chintana. So that's all that is, that's all we need to do to turn our attention back to ourselves. Tirumbiya hamdane dinamaha kankan teriyam andrane anaranachala.
I wonder whether all thoughts are the same as ego. Because ego in English has a different connotation. The Sanskrit word for that is ahaṅkāra, the creation of I.
Yes.
I thought.
Yes.
So I thought would be perhaps a more appropriate description.
Well, Bhagavan referred to the ego as ahaṅkāra. Yes. The usual word he used in Tamil is ahande, which is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit term ahanta, which means I-ness. But he also often called it the thought called I. It's all the same. They're just different terms, but they all mean the same thing.
So all thoughts are ego in that sense.
Not all thoughts are ego.
Mother of all thoughts is.
The mother of all thoughts, the thinker of all thoughts is the ego. All other thoughts are jada. But this, the ego, the first of all the thoughts, it is cit-jaḍa-granthi. It's got the chit component, which is the real component, and it's got the jada component, which is whatever we take ourselves to be. I am Michael. Michael is jada. The I who says I am Michael, that is, the I is the chit element. These two combined together, tangled together, that is ego. Cit-jaḍa-granthi, exactly. So that cit-jaḍa-granthi, that is the I thought. So whereas all other thoughts are wholly jada, this is the only sentient thought. And it's the only thing that is aware of other thoughts. What we really are is not aware of any thoughts. It's beyond all thoughts. It's only when we rise as the ego that all other thoughts seem to exist.
Michael, so the ego is only the I thought?
Yes.
The illusion of I?
Yes, yes. When we say illusion of I, it is when we experience ourselves as I am this or I am that. That is not what we... But in that I am this or I am that, the I is what is real. The this or that is what is unreal. That combination is the ego, the thought called I.
That's why it's printed sometimes I.
No, well, no.
I am only I.
I am only I, yes. I am I. Because in Tamil, like the word for who am I in Tamil is Nāṉ Ār. That literally means I who. Or if you want to say I am this, you say Nān idu, I this. So,
sorry, does it translate as who am I, Nāṉ Ār?
Nāṉ Ār literally means I who. But the am is understood there. I am who. Who am I? So just like we wouldn't translate Nāṉ Ār as I who, or who I, we shouldn't translate I Nān as I. The implication of it is I am I. Bhagavan said, so long as I remains as I am I, that is the reality. When it flies off at a tangent as I am this or I am that, there's a portion in talk somewhere where it's recorded like that. When it flies off at a tangent as I am this or I am that, that is the ego.
Could you say a little bit about the relationship between ego and consciousness?
Well, the ego is what Bhagavan calls cit-jaḍa-granthi. Chit means consciousness, the pure awareness. Jada is what is non-sentient, all the adjuncts, the things that, the entanglement. Now we feel, for instance, I feel I'm this body, I'm this person. That's a mixed awareness. There's the awareness I is mixed with awareness of some other thing. That mixed awareness, that is the ego. If we remove the jada portion, the adjunct, what remains, the I alone, that is awareness, that is pure awareness. In Upadēśa Undiyār, Bhagavan says, Irkum ekayal isa jivagal oruporle aba undipara upadi unuvei berundipara. That means in their existing nature, God and souls are one thing, are only one thing. Their awareness of adjuncts is what is different. And then in the next verse he says, seeing oneself without adjuncts is seeing God, because God is always oneself. So what he calls God there, that is what we really are. That is the pure awareness. So that's the real substance that we are. But because of our attaching ourselves to adjuncts, taking ourselves to be a person, rising as I am this or I am that, that is the ego. So the ego, the real element of the ego is pure awareness. But the ego itself is a mixed awareness because it's mixed itself up with adjuncts. And it cannot rise without mixing itself with adjuncts. So the essence of... the question you've asked is a bit like asking the question, what is the relationship between the snake and the rope? They're actually only one thing. So long as you think, so long as the idea this is a snake that causes us the fear. If we see what it actually is, but it's just a rope, then there's no fear. So what the ego actually is nothing but awareness. But because it now seems to be, I am Michael, or sorry, I don't know your name, whatever your name, I am so-and-so, I am this person. That is why that's why all the problem results from that. But what the ego actually is, if we look at it to see what it actually is, we'll see it was always only pure self-awareness, and there was never anything else.
So awareness is like consciousness.
Awareness, consciousness, they're just, I mean, it doesn't matter what term we use. But we use, when we talk about awareness or consciousness, we're not talking about it, often these terms are used to denote the quality of being aware. We're not talking about the quality of being aware. Now we're using awareness and consciousness in the sense of what is aware, what is conscious. But the Tamil word, the word in Tamil that Bhagavan often used for awareness is arivu. Ari means to know or to be aware. Arivu is the quality of quality of knowing or being aware, but it also Bhagavan used it in the sense of what we actually are. When Shiva Prakashan Pillai asked him, the first question Shiva Prakashan Pillai asked was, who am I? Bhagavan's answer was, Arive Nān, awareness alone is I. And then when he asked him, what is the nature of awareness? He said, the nature of awareness is Satchidananda, being, awareness, bliss. But so awareness is what we actually are. Oh yeah, I know. I said so. Bhagavan used this word arivu to mean awareness, but he also used another term which is suṭṭaṛivu. Suṭṭaṛivu literally means pointing or showing awareness, and Bhagavan used that term suṭṭaṛivu to refer to the ego. The ego is always in sleep. We're aware, but we're not aware of anything. Why don't we have any memory of what sleep was like? Because we were not aware of anything. So from the perspective of the mind or ego, sleep seems to be a state of blank. But actually Bhagavan says sleep is a state of pure awareness. But pure awareness isn't aware of anything. In waking and dream we're aware of things. That awareness of things is suṭṭaṛivu. So that is not real awareness, because that comes and goes. If awareness of things were real, it would be there permanently. What is permanent is just awareness. That's in sleep, what are we aware of? We're not aware of anything except ourselves. When we come back, we say, I slept. We can't describe anything about the sleep, but the fact that we say, I slept, means we are aware of ourselves in that state. So the pure awareness is only self-awareness. In the Mahavakyas, the great sayings of the Vedas, one of them is Prajñānam Brahman. That means pure awareness is Brahman. That pure awareness is not awareness of anything, it is just awareness. But when we rise as an ego, we become awareness of things. That's why in waking and dream we're aware of things, in sleep we're not aware of anything, but we're still aware. We cannot be aware of anything without being aware, but we can be aware without being aware of anything. So we need to distinguish between awareness of and awareness. What we actually are is just awareness, not awareness of anything. Awareness of things comes into awareness of is what we can call transitive awareness. And the pure awareness is intransitive awareness. It's awareness without any object. You know, in grammar we say if a verb takes an object, a direct object, we call it a transitive verb. If it doesn't take a direct object, we call it an intransitive verb. But awareness that we actually are is pure intransitive awareness, not awareness of any object. It's only the ego, that which is aware of objects is only the ego. Is that clear?
Awareness of the problem.
Good answer.
So, Michael, in this, do you see that through this question on consciousness and ego, when we are conscious and there's an ego, is it like observer and observed? Ego is observed by the observer, and when both observer and observed are not there, then it's pure awareness.
There is no observer other than the ego, because the pure awareness is not an observer, because there's nothing for it to observe. There's only itself. It's only when we rise as an ego, but there are other things to observe. In sleep, do you observe yourself? There's no one to observe there. You're just aware of yourself, but observation doesn't come into it. We don't need to observe anything to be aware of ourselves, because we're always aware of ourselves. We only need to observe ourselves when we rise as an ego and observe other things. We need to turn our observation, our attention, away from other things, back towards ourselves to see what we actually are.
We talk sometimes about attention.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about it in the sense, I get it wrong, were you saying once, this is kind of one's experience sometimes, that there is an attention to attention in a way when it comes to meditating. Could you just talk about attention?
Attention is a selective use of awareness. Now, we're aware of many things. So out of all the many things in this room, because I'm talking to you, I'm attending to you. That is, I focus my awareness on you. That focusing our awareness on something is attention. So it's a selective use of our awareness. Instead of attending to these flowers here or to this picture of Bhagavan, I'm attending to you. I've made a choice, because you've asked me a question, I'm attending to you. I'm directing my awareness towards you. That's what attention is. Attention is the nature of the ego. Because the ego rises and is aware of many things, it can select which one. We can't be aware of everything equally at the same time. So we're always attending to one thing or another. So attention is possible only when we rise as an ego. In sleep, can you attend to anything? Because what is there in sleep is only one thing. That is pure self-awareness. So there's no need to attend to ourselves in sleep, because we're not aware of anything else. But now in the waking state, because we're aware of other things, Bhagavan says, instead of attending to those other things, turn your attention back towards yourself. In a dark room, a small ray of light comes in and illumines the objects. Rather than using that light to see what are all the objects in the room, look back at the light, see where the light is coming from. Follow the light out if you follow that ray of light, it takes you out into the open, into the vast sunlight. That's just the analogy. Of course, if we look back at ourselves, we will see the source of the light.
Because I remember because in the past when you talked about this thing of self-inquiry, who am I?
Yes.
The way you sometimes said just attention.
It is only attention. But why is attention necessary? Because we're now aware of many things, we need to select to be aware of ourself alone. Instead of attending to anything else, we need to attend to ourselves. Bhagavan sometimes said, it's all a matter of attention. There's a term in Sanskrit, pramāda. As he said, pramāda is death. What is pramāda? Pramāda means negligence or inattentiveness. When we attend to other things, we neglect to attend to ourselves. So it's because of our self-negligence, all these troubles, but we rise as this ego. If we were always attending to ourselves, we would never rise as an ego. It's because of a negligence, but we rise as this ego, become aware of other things, and get enthralled with all these other things. So it's said in Sanatsujātīyam, an Advaitic text which is part of the Mahabharata. It is said, pramāda is death. Sada apramāda, that's eternal non-pramāda, is immortality. So we have to be eternally self-attentive. That is immortality. But of course, once the ego is destroyed, we don't have to make any effort to attend to ourselves, because there's no option to attend to anything else, because we alone exist. There is nothing else. So once the ego is destroyed, we don't have to make any more effort to attend to ourselves, any more than we have to make effort to attend to ourselves while we're asleep. It's only in waking and dream, when we're aware of so many other things, that we need to make the effort to attend to ourselves.
And for the one who has no ego, even when waking, it's just natural attention, obviously, whatever you call it.
If there's no ego, there's only one state. Bhagavan says in Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, it's only for those for whom there is waking, dream and sleep. But the state beyond these is called the fourth. But since the fourth alone exists and the other three states don't exist, the fourth, what is called the fourth, is itself a tita.
Is meditation a yogic technique in that case?
Meditation is a word that means different things in different contexts. But meditation that Bhagavan recommended is not meditation on anything else. The term he used in Nāṉ Ār is Svarūpa-dhyāna. Svarūpa-dhyāna means meditation on oneself, on one's own form, one's own real nature. So meditation on ourself is the way. Meditation on ourself is another name for self-investigation. We investigate ourselves by meditating on ourselves, by observing ourselves.
So it's the same.
Yeah. If you want to investigate something, if you want to investigate how newts turn into frogs, you observe them. So the basic tool of any investigation is observation, attention. So it's only by observing ourselves, by meditating on ourselves, by contemplating ourselves, that we see what we actually are.
Well, can I ask you a question? I mean, there are so many different techniques of meditation.
Yes.
Now, one of the techniques which I was taught was to still oneself and then concentrate here, and whatever thoughts come up in the mind, bring the attention back here. Now, sometimes that feels like a bit forceful kind of.
Yeah. Most things that people do in the name of meditation are artificial. But actually, there's no technique needed in this path of self-investigation. If you're out in the park in the midday and the sun is shining, what is the technique for seeing the sun? The only technique is to look at it. We wouldn't call that a technique, would we? No technique is necessary, no elaborate exercise is necessary. You want to see the sun, look up and see it. And if you happen to be in a nice warm place like Tirunamala, if you look up and see the midday sun, you'll be blinded. So also if we look and see what we ourselves are, we will be blinded. We will never see anything else. Because the ego will be dissolved, and without the ego, there's nothing else exists for us to see.
Well, so is there any point in, like, say, sitting for, meditation for an hour? I mean, the idea is really we should be practicing this every minute of the day.
Yes, exactly.
So is there an advantage to sitting for an hour every day?
Time doesn't matter. How long did it take Bhagavan to experience what he really wants? It happened in a fraction of a second. So what we need is not long duration in meditation. What we need is a single moment of perfectly clear self-awareness. So it is, and we can be practicing this. We don't have to be sitting. We don't have to be closing our eyes. We can do it. We can, even now while we're talking, are you not aware of yourself? We're overlooking the self-awareness, but it's always there in the background. So we can always be attentively self-aware, even in the midst of other activities. It takes practice because we are so used to attending to other things, getting preoccupied with other things, we keep on overlooking ourselves. But with practice we can train ourselves to be aware of ourselves, even in the midst of other activities. But so long as we are doing other things, we're only able to devote part of our attention towards ourselves. So there are times in the day, it doesn't have to be time of any duration, it can even be a few moments between one task and another task. Few moments, we can turn our attention more deeply back to ourselves. Whenever we don't have an immediate urgent other thing to attend to, we can turn our attention back. So sometimes it can be beneficial. We don't have to be sitting cross-legged in yogasana. We can lie on our bed or sit in a comfortable chair or whatever, and just try to go a bit deeper within. If we at the times when we are not preoccupied with other things, if we try to go deeper within, that will strengthen our ability to hold on to that what Bhagavan sometimes used to call that tenuous current of self-awareness, even in the midst of other things. What he means by current of self-awareness, the self-awareness is always there, but that current of attentiveness, that current of self-attentiveness, we will be able to hold on to it better, the deeper we're able to go within ourselves. And the more time we spend holding on to that tenuous current of self-awareness, what Bhagavan sometimes used to call Svarūpa-smaraṇa, that self-remembrance, the longer we hold on to that self-remembrance, the easier it will be for us when we sit or lie down to try and go deeper within. It will be easier for us to go deeper within. But the practice is not just, it's not like other meditations that you do for 20 minutes morning and evening. Bhagavan said it has to go on throughout the day. And he says in one sentence in Nāṉ Ār, if one clings firmly to Svarūpa-smaraṇa, that self-remembrance, until one attains Svarūpa, that alone is sufficient. Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu. So nothing else is necessary. Just trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness, that self-remembrance, never forgetting the background of whatever else we may be experiencing, the self-awareness is there. I am there seeing all this. I am there aware of all this. Holding on to that. That's what as St. Alistair earlier, we can use thoughts to remind us. Thoughts doesn't mean only the chatter that's going on in our head. When Bhagavan talks about thought, he says this whole world is thought. There's no world independent of thought. What is called the world is nothing but thought. It's all a mental projection. So whatever we're aware of, it should remind us of ourselves, for one who is aware of it. So we have to be trying to cultivate this habit of constantly remembering our self-awareness.
And that's enough. It doesn't, we don't have to have this regular.
No, Bhagavan says, Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, that alone is sufficient. It's useful. So if you're doing this all the time, when you're free, when you lie down in bed at night, or when you sit down to have your cup of coffee after a hard day's work or whatever, when you sit back and relax, you will automatically take that opportunity to go a bit deeper within.
I wanted to ask the question earlier.
Yes.
Then the question arose in me. I asked, who asked the question?
Yes.
And then I kept quiet, but now I'm going to ask it again.
Yes.
But my question is, who and how sadhana can be done? If the sadhana is for the ego,
yes,
it seems meaningless because it's a non-existent phantom. And if it is for the body and mind mechanism, everything is predestined.
Okay, but you say the ego is a non-existent phantom. Don't you feel you exist?
I do.
So that I who says I do, that is that non-existent phantom. Though it's a non-existent phantom, it seems to exist. And so long as the phantom seems to exist, it causes us all sorts of trouble, because we get afraid of it and everything. So this ego is giving us trouble, though it doesn't actually exist. So long as the snake doesn't actually exist, there's no such thing as a snake there, but so long as it seems to exist, we're afraid of it. So what is the solution? The only solution is to look very carefully at the snake and to see what it actually is. When we look at it carefully enough, we'll see it's a rope. Then the snake ceases to exist. So also, though the ego doesn't exist even now, it seems to exist. And because it seems to exist, everything else seems to exist. Bhagavan says when the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When the ego doesn't exist, nothing exists. So in sleep, there's no ego, therefore there's nothing else. As soon as we rise as an ego, in either waking or dream, we project this world, and all these things seem to exist. So we can't deny the seeming existence of the ego so long as all these things seem to exist. Because the one in whose view all these things seem to exist is only the ego. So this non-existent but seemingly existent ego has to investigate itself to see what it actually is. When it investigates itself, if it investigates itself keenly enough, it will eventually see that what it actually is, which is just pure self-awareness. Then there's no ego, and because there's no ego, there's nothing else. So this self-investigation is only for the ego. What we actually are doesn't need to investigate itself. It's only what we seem to be, namely this ego, needs to investigate itself. When it investigates itself, it ceases to exist. And all problems are solved. Many people, when we read Bhagavan's teachings, we need to have a coherent and all-round view of Bhagavan's teachings, because many people just take little snippets. They say, oh, Bhagavan has said ego is non-existent, therefore we shouldn't talk about ego. But Bhagavan has written the whole of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the main topic of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, though it's supposed to be 40 verses on what is. Actually nothing need be said about what is, because what is what is. Why we're not aware of what is as it is because we've risen as this ego. So the central topic of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is this ego. Because it's because of the rising of the ego, all problems have come. If we investigate this ego and see what it is, what will then remain, that is Uḷḷadu. So nothing can be said about Uḷḷadu. All the useful teachings can only be given about the ego. How the ego comes into existence, and because it comes into existence by grasping form, as Bhagavan says, grasping form means attaching itself to things other than itself. Instead of grasping other things, it should try and grasp itself. And if it tries to grasp itself, as he says in the same verse, tedinal otam pidicum, that means if sought, it takes flight. So, like any phantom, phantoms don't really exist, but they seem to exist. The only way to get rid of a phantom is to look at it very carefully, and then we'll see there's no phantom there. But so long as until we look at it carefully, it seems to exist. So this practice of self-investigation is necessary. Yes.
May I read some poem that I wrote some time back?
Yes.
You could, make some comments.
Yeah, okay.
It's my understanding of this. So it's about the ego. Nothing to be said, nothing to be done, all watched in silence. No one to claim, no one to blame. This seeming ego disabled. Observed as a child, naughty and nice. Let it play as it might. More and more tired it feels, with neither praise nor reprimands. It exists for itself, functional to its limits, to keep this body together. The stickiness seen through is stickiness no more. It arrives for a small part and ends up occupying all, larger than life. Now only a shadow left behind, following its master. As one they exist.
Okay. One thing I'd say that you say to hold this body together. It is actually the ego is not serving any purpose for the body. The body is serving a purpose for the ego, because without projecting and grasping a body as itself, the ego cannot rise. In a dream, when we have a dream, we see a world, but we also see ourselves as part of that world. It's because in a dream, how the projection it starts with, we project the body as ourself, and then through the five senses of that body, we project the world. So the ego cannot rise without projecting a body, experiencing itself as the body, and then through the sense of that body, seeing the world. So the ego doesn't serve any purpose. As you say, the ego is only for existing for itself. It doesn't actually serve any purpose. And everything else that seems to exist in its view exists for its purpose. Because if it didn't project things, like when we're not dreaming, we don't feel we're an ego. Bhagavan said this is also a dream. It's only when the rising of the ego and projecting of everything, and including a body which we experience as ourselves. That's all. It happens simultaneously. It's what's called yugapat srishti, simultaneous creation, or drishti srishti. Things seem to exist. All this world seems to exist because we see it. So the ego is the root of everything. And as you say, it exists only for its own purpose. But because it exists, and because what we actually are is infinite, indivisible, beginningless, endless Satchidananda. So that is perfect fullness, wholeness, complete satisfaction. Now we've limited ourselves as this little body, and we see a vast world outside. Naturally, we're not satisfied. How can we, the infinite whole, be satisfied being just this little apparition? So as this ego, we can never be satisfied. Whatever we achieve, we may want to earn money. However much money we earn, we won't be satisfied. If we're a millionaire, we want to be billionaire. If we're a billionaire, we want to still a few more billion. If we want, if we have a passion, say, for acting, we act and we want to have better parts, we want to develop our art more and more, we want to, I mean, whatever, if you see all the living beings in this world, from the smallest ant to the, everything is seeking some satisfaction in things outside itself. We enjoy food, we enjoy this, we enjoy that, but nothing satisfies us. Why are we not satisfied? Because we can never be satisfied so long as we separate ourselves from the whole that we actually are. So the ego serves no purpose except for itself, but the purpose it serves for itself is to make itself miserable. So once we understand that, the obvious thing is, if we can, Bhagavan said the ego is, when we have a headache, why do we want to be free of the headache? Because the headache is not natural to us. If the headache was natural to us, we would miss it if we didn't have a headache. But because the headache isn't natural to us, we want to be free of the headache. So also, because the ego is not natural to us, it will always make us uncomfortable. That is what he meant by dukkha. Dukkha means uncomfortable, dissatisfaction, suffering. I mean, it can translate it in so many ways, but people say, oh no, it's wrong to say the whole world is suffering, like they say in Buddhism. But all that dukkha means, it's not comfortable. We, the huge Brahman, are now confined within this little body. How can we ever be comfortable as such? So the ego is serving its own purpose, but its only purpose is causing misery to itself. If we could ditch this ego, then we would be the infinite whole, we'd be infinitely happy. So
because we exist in time. Now in time it seems like the ego gets weaker. It can even see its source, but still it exists in time. Now is there a process of being established in the source? At the same time you're continuing and living in the body.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I'm framing the question correctly. But, so, like sometimes we have glimpses. We know who we are. Okay? You know the source. The reference point has completely shifted. But yet, it seems to be living, this whatever, you're living, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're doing your duties. But something completely has changed within. Outwardly, everything continues as it was. Nothing has changed outwardly. But somehow everything inside is a complete transformation, complete shift of identity from this limited individual person to something else which is undefinable, really.
Right, okay.
Now, but there is a bit of coming and going.
Yes.
So is there a process? The question is, to get established completely without this coming and going?
Okay. Well, first I'll just answer one thing. You said we exist in time.
Right.
We seem to exist in time because we take ourselves to be a person. But actually time exists in us.
Yes.
In sleep there's no time. We experience time only in waking and dream. So, but time exists in us. So long as you talked about glimpses. Though we do get glimpses of something, it is not, we never actually see what we actually are. Because if we saw, for a moment, if we saw what we actually are, if you once see clearly that what seemed to be a snake is actually only a rope, you can never again see it as a snake. You cannot, till you see what it actually is, you believe it's a snake. That belief that it's a snake is destroyed forever once you see that it's actually just a rope. So if anything that we come back from is not the real thing. And what is real doesn't come and go. So it's, but I this ego, sometimes we do get glimpses of something far greater than ourselves. But the process isn't over. We have to continue whatever we may experience, however wonderful an experience it may be, however close to the reality it may seem to be, it's not sufficient. Whatever experience, any experience that comes and goes is not real. So to whom does it come? To who is aware of that? We constantly have to turn our attention back to ourselves. Even if we see vision of God or have any wonderful ecstatic experience, who is having that experience? In this way we have to be constantly turning our attention back towards ourselves. That is the only way to see through the ego. And when we see through the ego, when we see the ego doesn't exist, it's not as if it existed. Like when we see the snake is only a rope, we don't then think, oh, there was a snake there, but now I've got rid of it. We know there never was a snake there. I mean, any analogy we use is very crude in this context, but when we see that there's no ego, we see that there was never any ego. So it's not like the ego came and went. If the ego had once arisen, then there's always danger that it's going to arise again. But the final experience is the ego doesn't exist, the ego has never existed. What is alone has always existed as it is, nothing else has ever appeared. That's why the final truth is ajata, but nothing has ever, there never was anyone in bondage, there never was any seeking of liberation. There never was any liberation, because liberation has meaning only if there's bondage.
Yes, exactly.
So Bhagavan said that the real liberation is beyond bondage and liberation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
It's a little bit of a personal question. There's a concept called spiritual bypassing. I don't know if you know.
It's bypassed me.
It's come up on my Facebook page quite a lot because of the idea being that without guidance on the spiritual path, it is quite difficult, isn't it, to deceive oneself. For example, you could be trying to do all the right things and yet being rude to your parents or things like that. So the thing, I don't know what I'm trying to say, it's quite hard. One can get quite trapped up in all this business, can't one? I mean, quite easily, if there isn't someone guiding us, I mean, a person, and I suppose I'm talking about me, because realizing after quite a lot of years, I still behave in ways that, not very, I don't know, commendable or whatever.
Well, I'm sure we all act in ways that aren't very commendable. I mean, none of us are perfect. As a person, we are imperfect. We have our desires and we have our foibles and all these things. We can never, as a person, we can never be. There's no such thing as a perfect person.
No,
but
sorry to interrupt, but what I didn't express it very well. What I mean is, there's a subtle thing between repression and taking that step back within. It's very subtle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, yes. But we're not trying to suppress anything.
But I noticed, for example, in myself, for example, that I have perhaps suppressed, for example, when things are painful.
Yeah.
And I, say I would go and meditate or whatever. But when I look back, what I see is I was really repressing those feelings. I didn't realize it at the time.
Yes.
But with distance and time and years, I can see how a lot of it was repression.
Okay, but this is all part of the story of the outward you. But that is not what you really are. The one who has this story, who does all these things, it is not what you really are. What we are trying to do in this path is to see what we actually are. We're trying to disengage ourselves from this imperfect person that we now seem to be.
But what I'm saying is that process of disengaging and repression can easily be mistaken for one another. It's not that easy to disengage. You can sometimes, without realizing it, you can...
Well, yes. I know what you mean. There are so many things... that is why what Bhagavan has given us is a way to bypass this, because as this ego or mind, there'll be... We have to, the nature of the ego is Maya. It will always delude us. So we have to bypass it. And we can bypass it so long as we look outwards. We are sustaining the ego. We can bypass the ego only by looking within and trying to see what we actually are. Because
it's very difficult because, you know, there's this whole idea of introvert. Now, being an introvert is not looking within, it's something different.
yeah, yeah. No, it's not introvert.
No,
it's
exactly.
it's introspection.
It can be quite easy.
According, a person who is an introvert is a person who's wrapped up in their own thoughts and feelings and so on. According to Bhagavan, that is looking outwards, because all thoughts, feelings, the person we seem to be, these are all external to ourselves. They come and they go. We're not this person in sleep. It's only when we wake up that we seem to be this person. So we need to disengage ourselves from this person. And we seem to be this person so long as we are looking outwards, so long as we're looking away from ourselves. When we look back to ourselves, the I that rises to say, I am this person, I am Michael, or whoever, this I will subside only if we look back at it. So this is, we are not suppressing anything. If we're following Bhagavan's path correctly, we're not suppressing anything, we are bypassing everything.
I agree. We follow the path correctly.
Yeah.
Who's
I know, we don't all follow. I mean, we do, it's very easy to go astray, but that's where the words of Bhagavan are very, very useful, because it keeps us on track.
Well, it's very useful to come to somewhere like this, because, you know, when you're talking, it kind of feels like it's bringing the mind, turning the mind within.
Yes.
But, you know, in the course of our everyday life, it's quite difficult, unless we're living in a kind of, I don't know, in an atmosphere which is conducive to that.
Yes. Well, yes, but even looking for an atmosphere that is conducive, as again is looking outwards. Yeah. The only solution is to look within. There's a story, Bhagavan, well, it's a very well-known story, and it's in the Ramayana, a story, but Bhagavan used to tell this to illustrate a point. That is, there's a story that there was the king of the monkeys, the legitimate king of the monkeys. You know the monkey. You know, Hanuman was one of the monkeys, and the legitimate king of that race was Suṭṭaṟivu. But his younger brother had usurped his throne and stolen his wife. When Rama was going towards Lanka, they passed through this kingdom of the monkeys, and Suṭṭaṟivu came to him and told what had happened, that his elder brother had usurped his kingdom and stolen his wife and everything, and but he told Rama, but it's impossible for anyone to defeat him in battle because he has got a boon. He did some tapas and he got a boon, but whoever he faces in battle, he will get half of that person's strength. So even if God himself appears to fight with him, he will get half of God's strength, so he's automatically more powerful than any opponent. So Rama, to do justice for Suṭṭaṟivu, Rama had to kill Vali. But he cannot kill him by facing him in battle. So he told Suṭṭaṟivu, you go and challenge him to battle, and I will then come and kill him. So Suṭṭaṟivu went out and challenged his brother to a battle. His brother just laughed and came out, and they started fighting each other. And Suṭṭaṟivu was beaten and ran away. And he came back to Rama and said, you didn't do anything. He said, no, go again. I will deal with it. And eventually Rama hid behind a tree and he shot Suṭṭaṟivu from behind. And this is often debated whether, how can Rama do such an unrighteous thing? For a warrior to kill another warrior from behind. But it was the only way to do justice. Because Vali had that boon. If Rama had faced him in battle, he couldn't have defeated him. So he killed him, he shot him from behind. And then after he shot him, Vali said to Rama, as he was dying, he said, why you didn't come to me for help? I could have helped you to get back your wife, because I could easily defeat Ravana. And Rama said, no, I couldn't take you as an ally, because the wrong that Ravana has done, he's stolen my wife. You did exactly the same wrong. You stole your brother's wife. So how can I take you as an ally? But anyway, that's the story. The point that Bhagavan took from this story, the ego is like Vali. If we try to, the ego of the mind, if we try to face the mind in combat, try to fight with the mind, it will always get half our strength. So nobody can ever conquer the mind. The only way to conquer the mind is not to face it directly, but to turn back towards ourselves. In other words, turn our mind, our attention away from the mind, back towards ourselves. That is the only way, because as soon as we start trying to deal with the mind, we get caught up in its maya, because the mind is maya. So it's only by turning away from it that we can defeat it. So we can never defeat our mind by facing it, by trying to face it in combat, by trying to, people talk of controlling the mind, conquering the mind and everything.
Or thinking things through.
Yeah. The only way is to turn our attention back to ourselves. Then the mind will automatically dissolve. Because it's got no strength of its own. Why the mind seems so strong, it gets its strength from us. Because we give attention to it. Because when we give attention to a thought, if you have a worrying thought, the more you think about it, the more worrying it will be. If you,
my tendency is to say, okay, something like that, I will just go off somewhere, and then
we
think about it.
Yeah, well, we can't run away from our problems. There's only one place we can run away from all our problems. There's no place in the world to run away from our problems. The only place where we can run away from our problems is inside ourselves, by turning back within. Leave the problems to take care of themselves.
And you can do that when there's lots of people around your mind.
Yes, it makes no difference. It makes no difference. If you can't do it in a crowd, you won't be able to do it even if you go and sit in a cave in the Himalayas. Because the obstacle is our own mind.
So really that need to go off in silence or whatever is a need to really obsess even more.
Yeah. And we'll never find silence outside, because the mind itself is noise. So long as we are dwelling in the mind, we're dwelling in noise. Silence can be found only within ourselves, by turning back within.
And we each have to find our way ourselves to do that.
Well, yeah, but Bhagavan said, if the way is objective, it can be shown by someone else. But the way is not objective. So Bhagavan said, you need to be shown the way inside your own home. We each have to find... Can anyone tell you what it is to be self-aware? Can you describe self-awareness? But we're all aware of ourselves, so only we can turn back towards ourselves and see what we actually are. No one can do it for us. Of course, Bhagavan is doing all that is necessary for us, but in order to allow him to do his work, we have to do the little task that he's given us, which is turn back within and see yourself. That's all we have to do. Nothing else is necessary.
And the investigation is the meditation.
Yes. Self-investigation is the meditation.
Investigation,
Yeah.
who is
Yeah.
I, is
Yeah.
meditation.
Yeah.
When the ego ceases to exist,
Yes.
the mind still continues.
No. Because the mind is in essence just the ego. In verse 18 of Upadēśa Undiyār, Bhagavan says, the mind is thoughts. Thoughts alone are the mind. But of all the thoughts, the root thought is the thought is the thought called I. Therefore, what the mind is in essence is just this thought called I, the ego. So the ego, when we use the term mind, it's actually a rather ambiguous term because we use it in two senses. We refer to all our thoughts collectively as the mind. We also refer to ourselves who are aware of all those thoughts as the mind. So in that sense, what the mind essentially is just this I, the ego. Because all other thoughts are coming and going, so there's no other thought that we can point out and say this is the mind. So the only permanent feature of the mind, so long as the mind exists, I am there to be aware of it. So the I is the ego, is the essence of the mind. So generally when Bhagavan talks about the mind, he's referring to the ego. But in some contexts, he's referring also to collectively. So in the case of this story of Rama and Vali, when he says you have to ignore the mind, he means you have to ignore all other thoughts. How to ignore all other thoughts? Only by attending to the first thought, I. So it's only by attending to the essence of the mind, the root of the mind, but we can ignore the rest of the mind. That is what we have to do.
So I was saying that the mind and the ego are the same thing.
Yes. Yes. But sometimes we use the term mind to refer to the collection of thoughts. In that sense, that's not the same with the ego. But what the mind essentially is just the ego.
So somebody who's got no ego can no longer function.
Why would you want to function? Who is to function? It's only all functioning is done by the ego. The mind, all the other thoughts of the mind are just an expansion of the ego. That's why Bhagavan says, if the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If the ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. The ego itself is everything. So the ego rises and sprouts as, it's just like a seed when it sprouts, all branches, leaves, everything, trunk, everything comes. It's all an expansion of that ego, which is the root of everything.
So the ego creates my world, so to speak.
It doesn't create only your world, it creates the only world there is.
But there is my individual world.
Is there any other world?
This is what I see.
Okay, but in dream, do you have an individual, is there any, in dream you see a world?
Well, if it was common, everybody else would be able to see my dream.
But when you're dreaming, you see so many other people and they're all seeing the same world, aren't they?
No, they're in my bubble.
They're
in my bubble.
Yes, yeah, that is the truth. But so long as you're dreaming, all those other people seem to be seeing your world, don't they?
In the dream, yes.
In the dream, yes. So also in this dream, all the other people seem to be seeing your world. But when you wake up from this dream, you will see that you were the only one who was actually seeing it.
Absolutely.
So there is only one world, and that is the world projected by the one ego.
I have to think about
But Bhagavan has said this waking state is just a dream. So if this waking state is just a dream, in a dream how many people are actually, how many dreamers are there? There's only one dreamer.
me.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
And I am the only person existing.
No, you're not the only person. There's so many people here, but you're the only dreamer.
Yes.
Yes.
And it is my dream, it is my creation.
Yes.
And it is unique
Yes.
Nobody else can see it.
There is nobody else.
There is nobody else.
Nobody else, nobody in that context means there are no other dreamers. You are the only dreamer. But we say you're the only dreamer, that is not the final truth. Because if you look at yourself to see, who am I, this dreamer, you'll see that you were never the dreamer, and there never was any dream.
They say that the walls of Advaita are built out of the bricks of paradox.
Well, it seems paradoxical. It's paradoxical because we've got a certain preconceived beliefs about this world, that the world exists there, that there are many people, all these things we naturally believe. So it seems, in contrast to that, it seems paradoxical. But if we're ready to give up all our beliefs and just take on board what Bhagavan has taught us, there is no paradox there. It's very, very simple. Because we have risen as this ego, all this seems to exist. Does this ego actually exist? Investigate it. See that it doesn't actually exist, and therefore it has never existed. And then for whom is any paradox?
I'm sure that's true, but it takes my mind a little while to sort of get round to getting that.
Well, yes, because our mind is full of so many, we have so many beliefs, likes, dislikes and everything. Unless we're ready to jettison all these things, it's very difficult for us to take on board wholeheartedly what Bhagavan has taught us.
Amen to that. Yes.
And also, some of us have had different teachers and followed different paths.
Yes.
And I mean, you can't criticise those paths, they're different paths.
They're different.
So our mind is also full of all that stuff.
Yeah. That's why, but when people used to, Bhagavan sometimes used to say, in this path, it's not a matter of learning, but of unlearning.
Yeah.
We have to jettison all our old beliefs, including the root of all our old beliefs, which is the belief, I am so-and-so, I am this person.
Yeah. When Bhagavan says the I casts off the illusion of I, yet remains as I, such is the paradox of self-realization.
Yeah, Bhagavan is talking from our perspective.
Yeah.
Bhagavan also sometimes said, a time will come when you will laugh at yourself for all the efforts you've made. But that doesn't mean Brahman is really going to laugh at itself. It's just that Bhagavan is talking from our perspective there. He's trying to impress upon us how ridiculous our position is as this ego, but we, the infinite Brahman, now mistake ourselves to be the ego. The answer to that question can be found only by investigating ourselves. If we investigate ourselves, we'll find there never was any ego, we never mistook ourselves to be this. So there's no question to answer.
Going back to an earlier point you were making, I think you said something to the effect that unless you continue your meditation throughout all one's activities, it's not really meditation. I mean, it's... Hang on.
Yes.
There was a story that in the early days in the ashram, somebody used to play a radio loudly near the old hall. And Bhagavan didn't take any notice of it. He just sort of accepted it as part of what was happening. But one lady complained bitterly about this. And she said, why do you allow this music to go on while we're meant to be meditating? And Bhagavan just said to her, well, if you don't like it, you can take yourself away.
Yes, because it's not the music or any noise or anything that obstructs us. It's because we pay attention to it. So we have to be ready. if our meditation depends upon external factors, it's not going to be of much use to us, because we can't always be enjoying those ideal external factors. So even we need to be ready to meditate even in the midst of a battlefield.
Yes, yes.
So then only it's real meditation. But about you were just beginning that by saying, but I had said that it's not real meditation unless it's going on permanently. That's not quite the case. Even if we do it for a moment, it's real meditation. That even if we attend to ourselves for a moment, that is real meditation. But our aim should be to do it permanently. Bhagavan says, if one can hold fast to uninterrupted, nirantara svarūpa-smaraṇa, that means unending, unceasing svarūpa-smaraṇa, that alone is sufficient. Obviously none of us can do that. But that is what we should be aiming for. But we shouldn't get dejected, oh, I'm not able to meditate all throughout the waking and dream state. We won't be able to, because the ego will always be, the nature of the ego is to go outwards, to grasp things, but we have to, as much as possible, we have to be cultivating this habit of trying to turn our attention back to ourselves whenever we find it's been distracted. Slowly, 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 we cultivate that practice. We become, we get greater and greater ability to hold on to that self-awareness.
Yes.
But though the ideal we're aiming for is permanent self-attentiveness, Bhagavan knows that in practice most of us can't do that. And before we reach that stage where we're able to do it permanently, we're going to do it properly for 1 second, and that 1 second will finish the story.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, gosh. So there's hope for us all.
Certainly. There's hope for us all except for the ego. It's doomed. Sooner or later, however long it holds on, sooner or later it will give up and let go.
We hope.
It has to happen. Yes. Bhagavan says for the birds flying in the sky, there can be no rest until they return to where they came from. So we cannot rest until we get back there. No. We can rest for a short while and sleep, but we keep on bouncing out again. So if we want permanent rest,
we have to come down to earth.
Yep.
And stay there.
Yep. Yeah.
Can it be the case that we just don't meditate or do self-inquiries sufficiently to really make real progress? Like we do it up to a certain point, but in reality we're just staying, we're static, we're not actually really making any progress.
No.
Or even going back. I was thinking of a situation where you're going up a downward coming escalator.
Yeah.
You might be making an effort.
Yes.
But you're not making enough effort to actually get to resist the downward going escalator.
Yes. I understand what you're saying, but in fact, Bhagavan said, every small effort you make, no effort ever goes in vain. Yeah. So every step we take, we're one step closer to our goal. So we may be crawling along at a snail's pace, but at least we're going at a snail's pace. Better to go at a snail's pace than at no pace at all. And slowly, slowly we'll pick up the momentum, and until eventually we'll be carried away by it. We won't be able to stop. But we have to try. Wherever we are on the path, we have to be putting forth our effort, until the one who is putting forth that effort disappears.
That's profoundly reassuring, I think.
Sorry?
It's very reassuring, that.
Yes, yes.
And also encouraging.
Yes.
The realization happens in a split second.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
like waking up from sleep.
Yeah. There's no, he used to say there's no such thing as partial realization. You can't, if you jump 99% across the well, you end up inside the well, not on the other side. Then we can't be half alive and half dead. Either we're alive or we're dead. So the ego, either we're the ego or the ego is destroyed.
It's hard to take that on board, you know, that the effort is made therefore to accumulate it as merit. If time doesn't exist.
Time does exist. So long as the ego exists, time exists. Time is as real as the ego.
So it exists within time?
Within time, yes. When the ego ceases to exist, we'll see there never was any ego, there never was any time. There never was anyone who was investigating who am I. The investigation of who am I is necessary only so long as we seem to be this ego. And therefore time seems to exist.
So actually dramas kind of taking place here, but the drama being within time, and then once that is dissolved, then you're free.
Exactly, exactly.
And that drama within time is accumulated, so to speak.
Yes. Well, when we rise as the ego, everything else comes into being. We are not really this ego, so nothing else really exists. But so long as we rise as the ego, it seems to us that this is all real. We can't avoid feeling all this is real. Because we take ourselves as a part of this, because we are real, all this seems to be real. This body is not real. It comes in waking, it disappears in dream, it disappears in sleep. So it's a transitory phenomena. But so long as I feel this body is I, because I am real, the body seems to be real. And because the body seems to be real, and the body seems to be part of this world, therefore the whole world seems to be real. The world doesn't mean only the objects, the time, the space, everything. All these, everything arises along with the ego. So it's all as real as the ego. But is the ego real? That is what we have to investigate. There's no use us saying, oh, Bhagavan has said the ego doesn't exist. That doesn't help us, because who is saying the ego doesn't exist? It's the ego.
So once it's found out, the drama ceases?
No. Once it finds out, we find out that there never was any drama. It had never started.
So is it a bit like a film like The Wizard of Oz? You know, she falls into a dream and imagines this fantastic world,
yes,
where everything happens, and eventually she wakes up from the dream and realizes that none of it.
That is the first verse of Ekatma Panchakam. Bhagavan says, knowing oneself and becoming oneself is like waking up from a dream of wandering all over the world. It's just waking up from a dream, but with one important difference. When we wake up from dream, we recognize, oh, there was a dream. But this is a dream. When we wake up from this dream, we will recognize there never was this dream, because there never was any dreamer. So when we say, is it like? Yes, it is like to a certain extent. Bhagavan has used lots of analogies. None of those analogies are adequate, because no analogy can possibly be adequate.
So
So ultimately, does nothing exist at all? Is that what it's saying?
No, you exist. Can you doubt your existence? You definitely exist, because if you didn't exist, you couldn't be aware of all these things. The very fact that you're aware of anything, either yourself or anything else, shows that you exist. Everything that you're aware of could be an illusion. But it could be just your own mental projection. But you, who are aware of it, cannot be an illusion. So you must exist. But what is doubtful, the fact that you are is beyond doubt. But what you are is doubtful, because now you seem to be this person. Is this what you really are? If you were really this person, you should feel, I am this person, even when you're asleep. So this person is something that comes and goes. You are permanent. So you cannot be what you seem to be. So you definitely exist, but you are not definitely what you seem to be. So who are you? That is the whole, that is what we need to investigate. When we know what we are, we know we alone exist, nothing else exists.
The self alone exists.
Yeah, but there can never be a state of nothing exists, because one thing so long as we take ourselves to be a person, we can conceive our own death. Yes, we all know this body is going to die one day, it's going to be cremated or buried or whatever. But can you conceive your own non-existence? We can't, because Bhagavan said in a battlefield, when soldiers see all their comrades dying around them, they never feel they're going to die at that point. They're afraid that death may come at any moment, but not this moment. That illusion well, it's not an illusion. It's because we know we're going to exist. We know we cannot cease to exist. But because we take the body to be ourselves, we impose that on the body. How we all live in this world. We accumulate money, we strive for so many things, don't we? As if all these things were going to be permanent. But one day all these things are going to go away. But what gives this illusory dream a sense of permanent? Because we are permanent. So we superimpose our own immortality upon this body, and though we don't think this body is going to live forever, we live as if this body is going to live forever.